Hey folks, today I want to talk to you about a topic that is pretty dear to my heart, which is two toxic growth myths that I've recently seen making circles on social media, especially LinkedIn and Twitter. So probably you've seen Naval Ravikant's tweet that was kind of going circles this week. It basically said, if you're doing sales because you failed at marketing, and you're doing marketing because you failed at product. Right. A lot of people have already said that Naval basically posted this tweet because he wanted it to be so contentious that it would go viral. But I think a lot of people may have actually taken it seriously, right, and may have felt like a failure for a little bit, because there is still this mindset that if you build a really great product, they should come, right? Like your customers should just, be buying the product off the shelves and telling everyone. You should just grow exponentially, which is another toxic growth myth that I'm going to discuss today. You should just grow by the word of mouth, right? But unfortunately, this is not quite right, right? Like, even the most established, well-known brands in the world are still doing marketing, like Coca-Cola. So especially in more crowded spaces with a lot lower barriers to entry, right, where the competitors are popping up like mushrooms every day, or conversely, when there are some big players that already have an established brand, and you just popped on the scene with some kind of innovation that you want your potential users to consider, but they probably wouldn't think of you, or wouldn't even think to, search for your product or your solution, because there are already so well-known and established solutions on the market that they just go for the defaults, right? Obviously, in such situations, you really, really need to at least initially get the word out, get some users, right? Like, you won't grow in a vacuum, essentially. I think that's stating the obvious a bit, but moving on to the second growth myth, like in turn, this time Jason Lemkin and his recent post on LinkedIn made me think about it, that unless you grow exponentially in SaaS, you're basically dead in the water. So nobody will want to buy you, invest in you, and basically you'll fall into oblivion because all your competitors will overtake you. And then I got this newsletter from Anna Holopainen, who's head of growth at EdTech charity in Finland. And she wrote about the myth of exponential growth, actually, that unless you are growing in an infinite market, which rarely ever happens, or unless your market is expanding exponentially, right, your growth will always be finite. So exponential growth is basically growth by a higher magnitude, every time period. So say every year you grow by a multiple of what you had grown previously, right? So say if you grow by 100% in year one, then you're expected to grow by 1,000% in year two, and so on and so forth. So obviously, well, there should be, naturally thinking about it, a limit to this. Even big companies that have grown very, very fast, like Facebook, for instance, haven't really grown exponentially when you look at specific products, right? But the thing is that these large and well-funded companies sort of make an impression of exponential growth by, for instance, buying other companies, or stacking products and stacking business models on top of each other and expanding into new markets and new audiences. So then when you kind of summarize all these growth figures from different products, different markets together, you may get the impression of exponential growth, right? But for one particular product, it kind of rarely ever happens. It would be like a super outlier. just simply because usually the container where you're growing is finite. This happens to all marketing campaigns. They follow that same elephant growth, right? So initially it's flat, then it goes up, then the channel saturates and it goes down or flats out again, and then you need to find another channel, right? So essentially, these two myths are quite toxic for SaaS founders, because then they think they should pursue these growth metrics at all cost that in fact don't exist. And they may incur debt, they may, take out investments that are not really good for them and start trying to scale channels before they have really nailed them. So what to do instead? Like growing sustainably and, building a sustainable growth engine, a flywheel into your product, right? And into your market is the way you go. And even with the best product, you still need to market it both externally to your prospects and internally to your users. And in some circumstances, just tell your users how your product is going to behave, right, to foster positive behavior patterns in your users. I included an example from HubSpot, right? If I had not been informed, which is enough marketing essentially by HubSpot, that this pattern of action, not tracking this particular email, is going to happen, I would have never known, because it's a server level event, right? And had I not known, I would have thought that HubSpot failed me, right? That there was some bug, that they don't care, right? That it's simply not working. So sometimes you need to explain to your users by means of in-app marketing messages how your product really works, right? To foster higher product adoption. That's how you build that product-led growth engine. Yeah, of course, you can build them with user pilot. I mean, these experiences. So if you want to check it out, we're always there for you to have a demo with us. And in the meantime, remember that these two growth myths are actually not helping you. So yeah, don't fire your marketing, don't fire your sales department, and don't think that they will come if you build it. And also don't expect to grow exponentially, right? And that's it for today. I hope you all feel better after this video, and that you feel a bit more validated. You're doing fine. See you next week.